Good morning, good afternoon for some of you, and good evening for others. Welcome to the 2021 Animal Legal Defense Fund Student Convention. I hope you're all enjoying being back in law school this year. The future of animal law really depends on lawyers, so we're happy that you have chosen a career in law and very happy that you have joined the Animal Legal Defense Fund in our mission to protect and advocate for animals using the legal system. We love to hear all about the events and activities and everything you're doing in your law schools. So please keep in touch with us throughout the year. Let us know what you're planning and let us know what we can do to help you. We hope that this year you will continue to join us online at webinars and some student-only events. And I want to take a second to highlight two events because they're coming right up in October. First, on October 6th, we are holding a students-only webinar to kick off Speak Out for Farmed Animals Month. That webinar is about farmed animals and natural disasters. And that webinar is also going to launch our new Student Scholars Workshop, which we can talk more about. The 2021 Animal Law Conference is going to be held October 15th through 17th. It will be fully online again this year. And the agenda is full of some really interesting speakers and panels. Law students can attend the conference for free, and if you have not yet received the free registration code, talk to your chapter president. I hope that you enjoy today's convention. We've refreshed our format a little bit this year to give you some time to talk with us and with the speakers and with other students in small groups. I want to especially thank our career panel. And I know that they have lots of good advice for you, and I hope you have lots of questions for them. I also want to thank the students who are sharing their research with us on the Student Scholarship panel. I hope you'll engage with both panels. And finally, before I hand the mic to Priscilla, I want to acknowledge the team from the Animal Legal Defense Fund who's been working to bring you this event. Priscilla, Kelly, Nicole, Alyssa S., Alyssa N., and Elena. You can read all of their profiles on the convention app, and they're all online today. So please reach out for a quick chat with any of us or just say hi. I hope you have fun today. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Priscilla.
Thank you, Stacy. And yes, welcome everyone to the Student Convention's Career Panel. As Stacy mentioned, my name is Priscilla Rader-Kolb. I'm the Education Program Manager here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund, and I'm so excited that all of you are able to join us today. Animal law really is an emerging field with expansive opportunities, and we hope that this panel can inspire and motivate you in your future work. So with that said, I would like to introduce you to our phenomenal panelists today. First, we have Nadia Adawi, who is the Executive Director of the Animal Welfare Institute. Nadia, would you like to kick things off by sharing a few highlights from your career experience in the field of animal law?
I'd be glad to. So my name is Nadia Adawi. I'm Executive Director. I'm also General Counsel of the Animal Welfare Institute, which is frankly the perfect job for someone like me who loves variety and gets bored easily. Even though I'm older, I actually didn't graduate law school till 2011. Law is actually my fourth career. I also have an MBA, which is equally helpful in my job because a lot of what I do is dealing with finances and budgets. As you can probably already tell, my path to this job was anything but a straight line. My undergraduate degree is actually in electrical engineering, and my first jobs were designing cellular telephone networks. Then I did an MBA and was a business ethics consultant for a while. Then I ran a renewable energy company. Then I went to law school specifically to study animal law. And I think that what has helped me the most in my current position is my past management experience, managing people and organizations, both nonprofits and for-profits, and my broad knowledge of animal protection issues, most of which I gained in law school and in my private practice. Right out of law school, I actually knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find a place to do it. So I went out on my own as a solo practitioner specializing in animal law, which, as all of you who are studying this, is incredibly, it's incredibly broad. So I did everything from, nonprofit law, mostly for startup animal rescues. But that gave me a really deep understanding of nonprofit bylaws, articles of incorporation, general governance and compliance issues. But I also did, contracts. I actually did a lot of adoption contracts and consulting contracts, and also sorts of things that really are at sort of at the core of what an executive director at an animal protection nonprofit would do. Anyway, I'm very excited to be here, and I look forward to talking to all of you more about any part of what I've done that interests you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nadia. All right, and then next we have Elizabeth Baker, Regulatory Policy Director at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Elizabeth, could you share a bit about your career experience?
Yes, happy to. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share this information that I hope is helpful. And I'm looking forward to connecting with a lot of students over the discussion. I work at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., although the entire time I've worked from the comfort of my home in San Diego, California, but with a ton of work travel mixed in there, which has been really cool because I've seen so much of the US and Europe traveling for work. Physicians Committee, if you don't know, it is an organization that promotes vegan nutrition, compassionate medical practice, and work to end animal research, training, and testing. And it's been around since about '85. At Physicians Committee, I lead our efforts to end animal testing and drug development. Well, that's what I've led for about 5.5 years, but I recently was promoted to oversee all of our regulatory testing. So that includes chemicals, pesticides, tobacco, cosmetic, etc. Really any regulatory uses of animals. Nadia brought up what she did prior to law school, and I wasn't thinking to mention that, but I guess I will, because I do think we all come from just such different backgrounds. For me, I didn't know any lawyers growing up. I never thought that I would become one. I did my undergrad. I got out as quickly as I could. I took courses all year round because I just wanted to be finished with school. But then I got into the real world and was doing sales jobs, and I realized that I did not love that at all. And it was just a total suck on my soul. And so I decided to go to law school for animals, which is what most of you probably did. But I do think that my sales experience has been tremendously helpful in working with regulatory agencies, with pharmaceutical industries, with Congress, because so much of my job is trying to collaborate to get people to move forward and to kind of leave behind older practices that use animals. So I consider myself really working like in science policy for animals. For my days are all very different from one another. Sometimes I am working on law and policy. It can be drafting legislation, working on regulatory reform, trying to get agencies to publish different policies on animal testing that will help us move away from them. But I also do a lot of work on supporting science and organizing training in methods that don't use animals, which is funny to me because I also never thought I'd be working in science. But, I guess I'll wrap up with saying animals are used in really dreadful ways in the name of science. It would be considered cruelty if it was done outside of the laboratory. And really, for what? We have increasing evidence that animal studies are not all they've cracked up to be. They're not very good at predicting what's going to happen when humans are given medications or come into contact with a chemical, for example. There's a huge failure rate for products that are tested in animals that then have a different outcome in humans. So it's really, I see it not only as an issue of improving science, but also an ethical issue for humans trying to do better by humans. And then of course, an ethical issue for animals as well. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and breakout sessions. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I agree. We gather experience from all of our repertoire, not just law school. So I completely agree that sales definitely leads into negotiation. Next is Nick Frumhurst, who's a senior staff attorney and adjunct professor at the Global Law Alliance at Lewis and Clark Law School. Nick, could you share a little bit about your career experience? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And first of all, just thanks to ALDF for putting this together and everyone involved. It's great to be here with everybody from these diverse backgrounds. And then I think a theme that will be developed is sort of different ways that one might end up in the space of animal law. So I'll tell a little bit about my path. So I was, I guess, what they call K through JD. I was that one of those people. But while I was in law school, I didn't know that I would end up working on animal law issues. I really didn't know what kind of law I wanted to practice. So I ended up clerking for a while, kind of as a way to keep different options open, I guess, and get more exposure to litigation. From there, I did two actually, so that goes to the I'm still not sure idea. Eventually ended up working for a fairly large law firm, doing anything but animal law issues. So basically, a lot of collective action or kind of class action defense in labor and employment matters, defending corporations and just kind of doing the big law thing. And that wasn't working for me. So sort of personal and professional worlds coalesced nicely. My family, my spouse and our children are Bolivian. And so I decided I would move to Bolivia and kind of force myself to think of a different track. That got me into environmental issues. And from there, and that was 10 years ago now, I've worked in sort of, I guess, at the intersection of environmental and animal issues, specifically in what we tend to call wildlife law. And so most of my work now and what I've been doing for the last several years is in the space of wildlife protection work, anti-trafficking work, a lot of work focused on kind of fighting animal trafficking around the world. And a lot of the work there is within treaty spaces or connected to international treaties like CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, like the CMS, the Convention on Migratory Species. But then the other chunk, and actually I'd say lately it's been more of my kind of work, is focused on working in foreign jurisdictions, in foreign legal systems to find ways to maybe reform some laws to produce better protections for animals, wild animals, to do some capacity building with prosecutors and judges. There's just a lot of work there that's, I think, really interesting and important to make these issues more visible. And so that folks, coming from just sort of for lack of a better term, a general criminal mindset, understand, that listen, wildlife crime is a pretty big deal as well. And so that's a short little thumbnail sketch. I'll just end by saying, right now I'm connecting from Portland, but I spend most of my time working from Bolivia. So do a lot of work in Latin America and just really kind of like being in that region and taking advantage of my family connections in a professional way as well. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Nick. Next, we have Caitlyn Honks, Deputy General Counsel for Litigation at Peta Foundation. Caitlyn, can you share a little bit about your career experience?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with the Peta Foundation since 2015. I started out just in a counsel position. Peta had, at that point, kind of dabbled in litigation. They'd done, some Administrative Procedure Act work, a little bit of FOIA stuff here and there. I came in at a time where they had just started pursuing Endangered Species Act type work, which tends to be a lot more discovery intensive and in a way similar to what I had been doing before that. I was not working in the animal law space at all before that, but I had been doing kind of complex civil litigation. So just discovery in general and the process of a complex case was something that I was very familiar with. So When I came in 2016, I took over one ESA case and then just kind of sat down a few months into it with the organization and had a conversation with them about how we should structure things going forward. And what I had suggested, although at the time, not with the idea that in mind that I would run things, but what I had said is like, if we're going to be doing more discovery intensive, more complex civil litigation like this, we should kind of restructure things so that the organization looks like a highly specialized boutique law firm. They agreed. So I've been in charge of that now. So I founded the litigation division at the Peta Foundation a year and a half, 2 years into my tenure here. We now have 8 full-time litigators. And then, all of us oversee outside counsel. We tend to run all of our cases in-house, do all the drafting, do all the research on our own, and then just kind of affiliate with outside counsel to do the local counsel type stuff, make sure that our pleadings and our papers look like they should for particular jurisdictions. Our practice areas are pretty far ranging. They include a lot of Endangered Species Act work still. We do consumer protection stuff. We do First Amendment work. We kind of make use of whatever laws might be available to us. We've done some CEQA work, which is the California NEPA equivalent statute, and still do some FOIA and APA work as well. Before I came to the Peta Foundation and started this big project, I started out in big law like Nick did. I went to UCLA because I knew that I wanted to do animal law in sometime in the future. So the time I enrolled in law school, UCLA had just received one of those grants from Bob Barker to fund the study of animal law at various law schools around the country. And so I picked a school that I knew would have some sort of program in place already, knowing that this is ultimately what I wanted to do. But law school loans got the best of me in that process. And so I started out at a big firm in LA. I stayed there for about 5 years, but I was during that time still kind of dabbling in animal law as much as I could. I handled pro bono cases for various animal organizations around the country. And then after about 5 years there, I moved to a boutique firm up here in Seattle, which is where I'm based now, and continued to kind of do animal work on the side. I joined the board of directors for a chimpanzee sanctuary. I'm still a part of that. And then finally in 2015, decided it was time to make the leap full-time to animal law. So that is what I have been doing since then. Yeah, so that's the broad overview of my background and career path.
Thank you so much, Caitlyn. Next is Akisha Townsend Eaton, Managing Attorney at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Akisha, can you share a little bit about your career experience?
Yeah, sure, Priscilla, and hello, everybody. I am so happy to join you and then the rest of the panel here and listen to everybody's really fascinating stories and paths. So, as Priscilla said, I am the managing attorney specifically for our pro bono program here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. And in this role, I have an opportunity to support more than 2,500 volunteer attorneys and recruit new attorneys. So we've heard about folks such as Caitlyn that were able to serve in a pro bono capacity before going full time. So I have the pleasure of working to support these attorneys to provide assistance on our internal docket, which ranges the gamut of issues, pretty much everything that you've heard already in terms of the areas of animal law. We work on things from, sick puppies in pet stores, the sale of those puppies to animals in research laboratories, to USDA contracts to kill wildlife at the county level. We do work around ag-gag issues, legislative and litigation, and protecting animals in captivity and general cruelty matters. So have a chance to work on a range of those issues. In terms of my path, so I actually I guess you could say it started at ALDF, even though it took me a while to get here. So I actually, I'll go back to undergrad. I knew that I wanted to work on behalf of animals. And, my senior year of college, I saw a flyer. This was a long time ago, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, over 10 years ago, over 15 years ago. I saw a flyer about an international animal law conference. And I thought, what on earth is animal law? I want to do it. And, fortunately, the Animal Legal Defense Fund was here at this time, but many of the roles that you've heard about today, I mean, those positions and those opportunities didn't exist. So there wasn't really a straightforward career path for full-time attorneys at that time. So like Caitlyn, I saw an opportunity. So I actually waited a few years after graduating undergrad, and I saw the field develop. I saw litigation departments being created, and I saw an opportunity at Georgetown for a Bob Barker fellowship. And I said, it's now my time to go to law school. I hope that I get this fellowship when I graduate. I was fortunate enough to do that, but I really owe a lot to my experience at the Animal Legal Defense Fund as a getting involved with my chapter. I was chapter president and was able to take advantage of a lot of the student grants and educational opportunities, which there's so much more of now. And I was able to get a scholarship and have some really valuable clerkships. So I actually graduated. I was a fellow, a Bob Barker fellow at the Humane Society of the United States, where I worked drafting legislation at the federal, state, and sometimes local levels, primarily dealing with companion animal issues, but also working on the whole gamut of issues from Endangered Species Act, issues to ag-gag, to puppy mills, and other random issues that sometimes would pop up in legislative sessions. So I had a chance to do that. I've also had a chance to work at a couple of other organizations. So I did international policy work at the United Nations for a smaller organization, where I was able to kind of boost some of the issues facing animals at the international level, and get some organizations what we call consultative status. Was able to advocate for that there. And then I worked as a legislative attorney again at Best Friends Animal Society. So that was a dog and cat life-saving, advancing life-saving in shelters through legislative advocacy. So I worked in that capacity. And now I'm here. And I think one of the favorite things about this role is I get to take a broad-based knowledge, around a lot of different issues, and really learn about, what skill sets would apply here, which attorney, which firm would be best for this particular case, and be able to use it in that way. So it's kind of parallel to what a general counsel does in a pro bono position, kind of having a generalist knowledge around a bunch of different issues. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Akisha. And last but not least, we have Jessica Rock, a Georgia statewide animal crimes prosecutor and trainer, and assistant district attorney for the Talladega Judicial Circuit. Jessica, could you share a little bit about your career experience, and then we'll get right into
Thank you,
Q&A.
Priscilla. So I, unlike many of the folks on here, do strictly one thing, and that's criminal law. So I say when I do a lot of career days at schools and kids ask me what I do, and I say, I put people in jail who do bad things to animals. And that kind of sums up most of what I do. But I got started in my career back in 2004, and I was just fortunate enough. I became a prosecutor after clerking for a judge, and very shortly after becoming a prosecutor, I had a very forward-thinking boss who said, we've got these animal crimes, state laws. Why are we not prosecuting people under our state law? Why are we relying on animal control to go issue tickets and sending people through our municipal and magistrate courts who are committing horrible, heinous acts to animals? And we need to start doing something about this. And so she tasked me as being the animal crimes prosecutor for the office. And as you can imagine, that many years ago, it wasn't something that was really done and talked about and heard of like it is now. And so I fumbled my way through a lot of learning how to investigate these types of crimes. I worked very closely with the law enforcement in my community, and we learned how to navigate these cases together, how to deal with live animal evidence, what types of animal evidence needs to be collected and documented, what does actually fall under our statute. Because as you all know, laws are one thing, but then how we interpret those laws is another thing. And so we spent a lot of time making cases that were kind of some of the first times it had been done, not just in Georgia where I'm from, but in the country. And so I just started, like I said, prosecuting these cases back then on the misdemeanor level and then on the felony level. And then I was fortunate enough to get put in this position in Georgia, which I know there's not many around the country, to do animal law prosecution full time. So I do travel the state. I have kind of a home base that I'm sworn into, but I'm also sworn into another, I guess about 5 other jurisdictions that I handle the animal crimes specifically. And then I also serve as a resource prosecutor in Georgia for other prosecutors. So I help other prosecutors with navigating these types of cases. I help law enforcement with search warrant language, how to execute search warrants. And even if it's not a search warrant case, quite frankly, just how to gather the evidence. And then I also work obviously with the local shelters about handling live evidence and security concerns that come along with that. And so I basically serve as a resource along with my own caseload. And then last year, it's been a little over a year now, I was very fortunate enough to get a sworn federal prosecutor position in the Southern District of Georgia. So I am now also able to work with federal law enforcement to prosecute people under the Animal Welfare Act. And so I have a number of dog fighting cases and chicken fighting cases. And actually in the past year, we have taken down the 3 biggest chicken fighting operations in the state of Georgia and have all 3 of them under plea agreements right now. And they're all, one of them's been sentenced and the other 2 are about to be sentenced. And so I also do a lot of training. As you can imagine, the other part of my time is spent traveling the state of Georgia and training law enforcement and prosecutors on how to investigate and prosecute these cases. And then I also teach as an adjunct professor at the University of Florida, the forensic sciences program for veterinarians. And I'm also in the process of creating my very first class at Auburn Vet School. So I'm going to be able to create a class about why veterinarians, even if you don't have a state that requires reporting, why they should report. And a lot of that class is going to focus on the link between animal abuse and all other types of human violence, mostly domestic violence, elder abuse, child abuse. And then on the animal fighting side of things, the connection to gangs and drugs and weapons and things like that. So I think that sums up what I do every day.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, so now that you've heard a little bit about their backgrounds and you've seen just how many pathways there are to reaching, your dream job, and how oftentimes that dream job isn't one that you land right out of graduation, right out of law school. So we will get right into questions, and I have one for Nick. Kelly's wondering, do you have any recommendations for a student interested in wildlife law in particular? Is it wise to work on getting experience in a mix of environmental and animal law issues? Great question.
That's a great question. So I guess I would first begin by saying, if your law school does offer a class like wildlife law, at Lewis and Clark, we have a summer program, at least a summer class, at least, that's international wildlife law. So if your school offers something like that, and you have an opportunity to take a class like that, I think that's a great way to get some exposure that's, just directly on point. If your school doesn't offer something that's sort of that tailored, right, which many schools don't, probably most schools don't, then yeah, I think taking, a class in environmental law, international environmental law, simply because wildlife trade issues are loom, I'd say, in some ways even larger in international environmental law when we're talking about international trade in animals. The CITES convention, which I mentioned earlier, that deals with only trade crossing borders. So taking an international environmental law class could be great. But failing that, I think taking an animal law class and an environmental law class and just looking for opportunities to kind of work in the crossover space. I think more and more organizations, be they sort of advocacy groups or, public interest litigation firms are working, in wildlife law, whether that's on sort of domestic or within domestic frameworks, things like the Endangered Species Act, right? Or international wildlife law. So I think there are opportunities there. So if you're interested in it, I'd say just look for those opportunities and may take a little bit of investment and time and outreach, but I think you can find ways to begin to get some exposure.
And I can also chime in as somebody who hires wildlife lawyers. And most of our wildlife law work is administrative law. It is challenging agency decisions. It is, Endangered Species Act, yes, listing, delisting, a lot of NEPA. So any opportunities you have for getting expertise in those sorts of areas of law will serve you well in litigating, or rather advocating for wildlife.
And I'll also chime in one additional thing. That's a very, very good point. So with any of these areas, I love how, environmental law and animal law and every other sub type of law, they intersect with one another. So I would encourage you to think broadly. There are many other courses that you might take that touch on both of these issues. For instance, municipal law, right? So we talked about the Administrative Procedures Act, and you get common themes in terms of, what procedures were followed here, was the right kind of notice presented to the public? Did they have enough time? Were the right procedures to comment available? So I would just encourage you to think broadly. Every course that you take will have some connection, will likely have some connection to animal law and environmental law as well.
And I'd like to chime in too. When I was in law school, I went knowing I wanted to work for animals. I didn't know how in the world I would do that. At first, I was thinking like fighting breed-specific legislation, which I still think is really important. But I started hearing about the issue of science and how these using animals is not the best science, but it's what we're still doing. And I wanted to understand why. And I did not have a science background, as I mentioned. And so I essentially used my law school experience to learn about science by writing about animal testing in a different way in almost every course that I took, or in as much as I could. So for example, I took FDA law, I took biotechnology seminars, I took animal law, bioethics, administrative procedures, and there were more, but those are the ones that are sticking out that helped me because, when you take these seminar classes, we all know how many hours and hours you spend researching your topic. And so if you can if you have an idea of what you want to do, wildlife related, you can really focus that via the research you do for papers in these courses. And if not for that, I think it would have taken me a lot longer to hit the ground running, which I was able to do really after law school because I spent all this time researching and writing in these classes. And actually, it's pretty funny to me. In law school, I wrote a paper for FDA law on animal testing for human drugs. And I ended up getting, I was really surprised. I got the highest grade in the class. And I think it's just because I cared so much about the issue. I was just excited about it and wanted to learn. And I really spent a lot of time thinking about it and putting together a paper. I then put it online just to see, hey, would anybody publish this? And I got an offer to publish it almost right away, which shocked me. And so I thought, okay, there's something to this, and maybe this is where I should spend a little bit more time. But in that paper, one of the conclusions that I came to was that FDA needed to broaden its regulations governing drug developments, because right now the regulations mandate animal tests, and you're in this really strange position where companies might want to use non-animal approaches, but they really can't because they've got to check that box for the agency. And I thought back to, I don't think that much about law school, but I thought back to law school not long ago because I have made that regulatory issue from that law school idea a huge part of the work that I do every day and have done for years. And last year, I worked with Congress to get FDA to tell them that they had to make these changes. And it's coming up in 5 days. September 30th is the deadline for FDA to update Congress on the progress that they've made toward doing that. And so I was just kind of thinking about this and laughing, like, wow, I just came up with that in law school when I thought I didn't know anything. But here I am still working on the same issue all these years later.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to move on to, this question is for Nadia. And it's talking about how one of the issues they're facing, especially at the student chapter level, but just also generally as a law student interested in animal law, is a lack of opportunity and resources in the southeastern region of the United States. But we also see that happen in Midwest and in other parts of the country. Do you have any advice or resources that about creating opportunities in areas lacking established animal law institutions? And then we can pass from there.
That's a tough one. And, of course, the canned answer is going to be create your own opportunities, and that's not particularly helpful. But so I will say, though, that one of the few good things that's come out of the pandemic is that we are increasingly able to work remotely. So your opportunities are no longer as limited geographically as you think they might be. I am actually a big fan of state bar associations. And I was actually, co-chair of the Pennsylvania State Bar Association Animal Law Committee for a long time. I know a lot of state bar associations and even local bar associations do not have animal law chapters, but they could. And find some like-minded people, try to get that together. That's a good way to sort of build the capacity very locally, very regionally. But other than that, really, there are opportunities now, I think, all over the country. Yeah, I guess don't limit yourself.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So I am in the Southeast. I'm from here, live here right now, though I started my career in DC and stayed there for a while before coming back home. But I'll echo what Nadia said. We are fortunately in a virtual world now. I would recommend definitely taking a look at some of our Animal Law Academy webinars to get a broad range of knowledge across the spectrum of animal law issues. I would also encourage you to, in addition to looking to see what bar associations there might be, there's also the American Bar Association, which has student opportunities. So I definitely look at joining that because I think they're always looking for student participation. But in addition to that, I would suggest getting hyper local, because so many of the laws and policies that impact animals happen at the local level. in every community. So I would take a look at your local ordinances and see, what animal laws exist at my local and state level. How do they interact with each other? Who makes the decisions about, animal laws in my community, and how can I interact with that person? It's interesting. In my community, the people who shape the laws impacting numerous animals, from dogs and cats to farmed animals to wildlife, to the extent that state level doesn't control, a lot of that happens at the local level. So you need to look at the folks who are driving that decision. You can study the process of how a lot of these meetings are, they should be open to the public. So definitely considering attending either in person or virtually increasingly, and adding your voice and using, we have a lot of resources to kind of guide you. And that also provides an opportunity for you to practice things like testifying, providing public comment, and really engaging with your community, and helping drive some of these changes, because so much of it does depend on grassroots engagement, and really getting the public aware of these issues and driving change within communities, starting at the local level.
Great points. Thank you, Nadia and Akisha. I'll add that everyone at the Animal Law Program, we're always, our inboxes are always open. So please do reach out to us if you are having any questions, concerns about how to get engagement at your school or in your community. We're always happy to help. This question is for Caitlyn. To start off. And when hiring, what do you look for in an application, cover letter, resume, and then also going into the interview? What do you look for?
Yeah, so I am a bit more specialized than some of the other panelists in that, like, all I do is civil litigation. And so when I'm hiring, I look primarily for people who have like real kind of in-depth civil litigation experience. I want somebody who's handled a big case, who, knows what it is to manage large-scale document discovery, or, brief a summary judgment motion, or argue. That's the primary thing I'm looking for. I also want people who have some sort of demonstrated dedication to this practice area, but that doesn't mean that I'm only going to hire you if you come from another animal organization. Frankly, somebody who comes in having defended corporations, is fine with me if they say, well, I'm vegan, it's not like a strict list of criteria that I look to. I kind of think, especially in this area of law, we're looking at pretty horrific things every day. And even if somebody comes in and they are, not a hardcore animal rights person at the beginning, it'll take them a couple of weeks in this job before they're converted. So I would rather have the nuts and bolts skills there than anything. That's probably the primary thing that I look to in kind of building out our practice group.
Thank you, Caitlyn. Nick?
So I'm not really in a position to do much hiring, but I would just add on to what Caitlyn said, in the sense that if I were in a position to do hiring, or advise another organization on hiring, I kind of share the sentiment that, passion is important, right? But it's not enough by itself. And I don't mean this to be sort of a downer kind of a message, just to reinforce the idea that really kind of focusing on skills, and a lot of those skills don't have to be subject matter specific, or aren't subject matter specific. Like I think Caitlyn is suggesting in civil litigation, if you know how to work the FRCP, you know how to read a docket, you know how to, put together a brief or a motion, that's really, really important, for any kind of subject matter specific litigation. You can more easily make that transition. And then the same goes for other spaces. There are these sort of subject matter agnostic skills that I think that's where you want to build your foundation. Passion related to issues, I'm not trying to discount at all, but passion is something that you have, or you can quickly acquire when you're exposed to these issues. The other is kind of a process that you work on over time and just continually build. So I would just, I guess, echo in a less articulate way than what Caitlyn said, that basic point.
That's great. Elizabeth?
And so what I have to say is a little different than what Nick has to say, but perhaps it's just the nature of the differences in the work that we do. When I am hiring, I look to see that someone has passion, because for regulatory work, it's like a very tedious, long game that is just based on relationships. And I think what I have found over the years is the people who are still with us and who are our strongest staff are the ones that have the passion, because otherwise you are just getting rejected. It's like constant rejection, but you have to just keep going. And I think it's that passion that keeps people willing to do that. But I also look just to see, I try to understand, do they have a capability to think? So I don't want people just telling me the talking points from an issue. I want to have some sort of understanding that they've thought about the issue and have some sort of perspective that is beyond just maybe what was on our website. So of course, it's really important to go to the website to understand what an agency is doing, but thinking about it, kind of having your own perspective, and then also demonstrating that you're a hard worker is something that I look for as well.
Perfect. Thank you all. This is for Jessica. What kind of experience, including classes, extracurriculars, clinics, anything like that, would you suggest for someone interested in pursuing criminal law with an intent to one day practice animal law within criminal?
Well, so I've seen a couple of the questions that I can probably answer in answering this question as well. So my suggestion in how to do these things is network. We talked a lot about, or I've seen a lot of questions about what classes can I take in law school, and I think that's very important, but your law school classes are going to limit you to a certain extent, depending on where you're in law school. Get involved in organizations that have something to do with the field that you're interested in. If you don't have a ALDF chapter at your law school and you're a first year, think about creating one. You don't have a criminal law society and you're interested in animal criminal law at your law school, think about creating one. And I know Nadia mentioned that, well, create one. And it's kind of true though. I mean, I went to Emory Law School and we didn't, as you can imagine, there was not a lot of focus on animal law, nor was there a lot of focus on criminal law. And I kind of had to revamp our criminal law society so I could have like-minded people getting together with me talking about these issues, where I went to school with a bunch of people who wanted to go do big firm corporate work, and it just was never something I even went to law school for. But networking is probably what I can say is some of the most important things that you can do as an attorney, as a law student, is get to know people, go to events, talk to people, like, things like you all are doing today by coming here on a Saturday and listening to us speak is just one of the many things that you can do. All of us are available not just on this webinar today, but also afterwards. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow the articles that I post, follow the work that I do. Find people if you're interested, like, for example, in criminal law, find somebody in your state that does it. I have seen so many great things come out of the progression in our society with animal law in so many different aspects. I used to have to post, opportunities for internships with me. And I do, by the way, take an intern every semester, and it doesn't have to be local in Georgia, because I believe it's important for us lawyers to give back to our community and our law students, especially for those people like me who went to law school with not a lot of opportunity in animal law and kind of had to create it myself. So I do take an intern every semester. It's not fortunately paid work, but it's just about learning things, building your resume, getting things on your resume that have to do with animal law specifically. And like I said, just networking with people. It's amazing what you'll find and probably just being a part of this panel, you're like, wow, I didn't even know there was all these different things that I could do when it comes to animal law. So really just talking to people, getting to know people, and putting yourself out there to network and meet people that do the things that you do. It'll open up your mind and your, just the opportunities that are available exponentially.
Yeah.
So I know that was a lot, but I hope I answered several of those questions with that.
Yeah, great points. Great points for me. Caitlin and then Elizabeth.
Oh yeah, I would just want to echo the networking point and kind of give some personal examples of how that's played out in my career, because I didn't really touch on that when I was introducing myself. But so when I started out, I worked at a firm called Milbank Tweed. And the reason that I picked that firm actually is because when I was in law school, one of the things that the Bob Barker grant funded was this. It was like every year you either had to have an animal law class or some sort of event. And one year the event that we had was this symposium for authors that had contributed to a book that the animal law professor at UCLA was writing. One of those authors was this guy named David Wolfson, who is a partner at the firm that I ended up working at, and pro bono does all this animal law stuff. And the reason I ended up in big law actually in the first place was because David talked to me that summer and was like, I promise I will get you pro bono opportunities if you come here and get some training and do this for a few years. So I ended up there. I also, while I was in law school, ended up working for a guy named Bruce Wagman, who at the time was chief outside counsel for ALDF. He's become a good friend. Through that connection, I ended up on the board for the chimpanzee sanctuary because he was one of the founding board members up here. And then when I was at Milbank, I did this other pro bono case that was actually in this like disability rights space, suing LA County jails to get special ed services. But one of our co-counsel who worked for the disability rights organization that we partnered with ended up going to Peta. And so when Peta posted a position for a counsel opening years down the line, I reached out to him and said, can you talk them into letting this be a remote position? Because I don't want to leave Seattle. So whatever these relationships are, you never know how they're going to benefit you down the line. And I never could have foreseen all of these things kind of lining up for me, but just maintaining those relationships pays off in ways you don't necessarily anticipate.
All excellent points. I do want to follow up on this networking thing because it was very uncomfortable to me when I was in law school, and I know that sentiment is shared by a lot of students. But what I just made a rule for myself, like, okay, if I'm going to this meeting, I have to talk to 3 people. And if I attempt one person and it doesn't really go anywhere, that doesn't really count. And then now if I have interns or really any of my staff, I have that same, it's not really a rule, but I recommend that they do it. When I was running the Untitled Chapter at my law school, which I think I need to give a lot of thanks. I'm very grateful for that experience. For every event that we hosted, I would open it to the public and really try to get as many people there as possible. And then a little rule I had for myself was introduce yourself to every single person in the room before or after. And during one of the talks, just a local person came and I went and introduced myself to him, and I asked about his interest and, why he was there. And he said he ran a foundation. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I didn't know that meant that he was philanthropic and was learning about animal issues. And so we built this kind of professional relationship that all came from him attending this event that our Untitled Chapter ran and me introducing myself. And I think when we talk about opportunities, some exist, and as Nadia said, some you have to create. And there are a lot of people out there who are looking to support people that they trust, that they think are professional, are going to work hard for animals, and they want to trust you. They want to have a relationship with you. And so we built that over the rest of my time in law school. And then when it was time for me to graduate, there were not really any positions that were open for people with this skill set that I had built. And he ended up funding my first year of work as a lawyer through a nonprofit. And that never would have happened if I didn't just have this rule, talk to every single person at this out of event. And I probably wouldn't have my job now. Well, maybe I would, but I would have got there a lot slower if I didn't have that year of work that was sponsored by this foundation.
Thank you all. And it's such a great point because you don't know what's happening while it's happening. It's only in hindsight that you can put all the pieces together and to see how a chance meeting can have such impacts later on in your career. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. I remember my first year of law school, we were always taught, look around you. Your peers sitting with you in class are your future colleagues. Those relationships are important. Your relationships with professors, community members, other attorneys, so important. So great points. Thank you all so much.